Good afternoon and welcome everybody. This is Brad Warnock from Simplus. We're going to get started with our webinar, Saving Time and Money with CPQ. And I have got a couple of friends on the phone with me. I've got Robb, who is with Limelight. Robb, if you want to say hello, I'm sure we'll do more introductions to Limelight as we get going.
I think we got these the names commingled there. It's Vic Pariso. Thanks, Brad, for the introduction. Sales Operations Manager at Limelight Networks. Just a little bit about my background. I've been working with Salesforce as a system solution for over 10 years. I've worked at enterprise companies like Clear Channel Outdoor and currently with Limelight Networks. I've also run a Salesforce consultancy working with companies in later stage funding out of Silicon Valley, where in their early stages they had introduced a more complicated rollout of Salesforce and needed to simplify and make it more responsive to the business. My philosophy has always been to use the out-of-box architecture to the fullest extent possible, using as little custom code to keep the environment as streamlined and responsive to the needs of business as possible, which obviously fits nicely with the theme here of going native with Salesforce, and is exactly the approach we took when we tackled the CPQ project. So looking forward to telling everybody more about that later in the presentation.
Vic, thank you. Appreciate it very much. And I apologize for the name. I asked it for pronunciation, then I wrote it down next to the wrong name as we got started. So I know who you are.
No worries.
Sorry about that. That's the perfect start. Robb, absolutely. You want to say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brad. So hello, everyone. My name is Robb, and I'm the Senior Manager of Product Marketing for Salesforce CPQ, the CPQ part of the Salesforce Quote-to-Cash package. And I've been with Salesforce just a little bit over a year now. Actually joined the company through the acquisition of SteelBrick, which is what gave us what we know as Salesforce CPQ today. So huge thanks to our partners over at Simplus and to Brad and Paul for hosting us today, and certainly for Vic for joining us. I'm really looking forward to today's session.
Perfect, thank you. I'm the Director of Sales Operations here at Simplus. This is Brad Warnock, and you may know Simplus as a background. We won't do a lot of salesy things on today. We're going to be talking a lot about CPQ, but we're a gold certified partner with a team across the United States focusing on everything from mid-market to enterprise accounts, and we have a specialization within CPQ. Obviously, we do almost everything in the Salesforce ecosystem, but we have a specialization in CPQ, and looking forward to speaking with everybody today. And you'll hear every once in a while the voice of our producer, Paul. He's going to handle all the technology on the side. So if you hear us talking to Paul as we go, you'll understand why. I did want to just flash up the safe harbor clause. I think everybody's seen this. Obviously, we may talk about future features. Not a lot on here. We're really going to talk about Vic and his experience with CPQ at Limelight most of all. So talking about today's customers, Robb, I really throw this over to you. You know, in this world of so much advanced technology, our customers are beginning to expect really kind of enhanced experience as they're buying technology. Tell us a little bit more about what you've seen out in the market.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And that's incredibly true. I think, you know, the bottom line is that today's customer is a different animal than what we've seen before, and they really do expect a completely frictionless buying experience. And we need to be able to deliver that because we are facing significantly more competition than we have in the past. And I've really seen kind of two key trends fuel this change in today's sales challenge. One is the increasing consumerization of business-to-business sales. If you think about apps like Amazon and Uber, they've set this expectation in the customer's mindset that solutions are going to be not only deployed very quickly or developed very quickly, but also incredibly personalized to your own business or the customer's own business. So we need to be able to rapidly identify and understand our customers. We need to be able to rapidly tailor solutions to meet those needs, and then deliver that proposal professionally and very quickly. And so that means very much for modern field sales teams being able to really work from anywhere at any time and be able to connect with the customer wherever they are. So that I think really helps us to frame the challenge of the customer. But one thing that we've noticed is that this is really compounded by 5 key challenges in the quoting process that make it very difficult for companies today to address the high expectations of modern customers. And one is for organizations that sell subscriptions and recurring revenue, there's some additional groundwork that has to be covered in order to quote and sell that solution accurately. One is to be able to manage price adjustments from year to year, manage co-termination of add-ons and upgrades, and then also be able to accurately forecast and manage renewals as those deals come due over time. Similarly, complex products and bundles mean complicated product configurations and requirements, which means there's also a greater opportunity for error, as it's on the onus of sales reps and operations teams to ensure that product exclusions, requirements, and other rules are followed appropriately. Similarly, complex pricing schemes around subscriptions or promotions are extremely difficult to manage with one-off or manual processes like most organizations are doing today. Inflexible pricing tools often require multiple SKUs for the same product, only to reflect changes in price and not actually changes in functionality, which is very confusing as sales teams go and try and put together solutions and proposals for their customers. So at best, it makes it difficult to control prices being offered, and at worst paves the way for pricing errors that hurt both your business and your customers' expectations of you.
Yeah, hey Rob, you know, just quickly interrupt. It seems like those two items, the complex products and the pricing discounts, those seem like they're the sweet spot for CPQ in a lot of ways. Granted, you have I know that Limelight used your contracts and orders capability very well, but those two items seem to drive CPQ value quite a bit, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that really is the core of it, right? That's the C and the P in CPQ. And they're intrinsically related as well. The more complex your product requirements are, the more complex your bundles are, chances are highly likely that the price rules that go along with that are going to have a lot of complexity around there too. And so being able to manage discounts for different components within a bundle can become a challenge. So you know, it really becomes beneficial to have a tool and some automation around that to make sure that configurations are accurate and that, you know, discounts are within control and managed through appropriate approvals as well.
Yeah, and that really drives that sales productivity, right?
It does. I mean, you know, as we saw in the previous couple of slides, customers expect really rapid responses from sales teams, and as customers are coming into the buying cycle later and later, it's really important that sales teams are able to do that configuration, do that pricing quickly and accurately so that they can get the right solution in front of the customer at the right time. And then, of course, you know, we need to be able to tie that off with the appropriate contract, the right terms and conditions, and then finish the whole thing off with a clean order that can be accurately fulfilled so we can actually start to meet our customers' needs.
Thank you.
So it's easy to think of the sales cycle as really just being a sales challenge, but the reality is that it affects and depends on teams throughout the business. At the top, sales has to engage with customers to accurately understand their requirements and then use that information to create an accurately configured solution and price it in accordance with the customer's budget. To make matters a little bit more complicated, for many businesses, part or all of that process can also be handled by reseller partners. So there's going to need to be some additional assistance or some sort of self-service element that helps those resellers and partners engage with customers accurately and effectively as well. Once the customer accepts that proposal, the quote, of course, has to be contracted and turned into an order with the help of the operations team. But when quotes are not automatically tied to the contract and order process, and we delve into different systems to manage different parts of that process, there's an abundant opportunity for error in both order creation and in assigning the correct contract terms. Once we have that order created and the contract signed, of course, we have to bring in finance and support to get involved and start to manage billing as well as customer success to make sure that customers are actually successful with this new solution, which means that support teams need to know what entitlements the customer has, and billing teams need to accurately understand the agreed upon payment terms and prices. But of course, without having a centralized repository of information, it's difficult for these teams to know exactly how to respond to the customer and accurately engage with them when they have questions. And then for all of you that sell on a recurring model, or even those that don't, we know that it's a lot easier to sell to existing customers than to add on a new one. So the sales cycle doesn't really stop at support. Sales teams need to be able to effectively collaborate with customer success to start to drive add-ons, cross-sell new products, and then for subscription businesses, be able to accurately forecast and secure those renewal opportunities as well.
Oh, that's great. And this next slide, it's interesting because you really are leading right into it. That's the real advantage of running CPQ on the Salesforce platform, right? Because all that is completely integrated, and you're able to include communities and everything else you would like to have across your entire organization, right?
That's right. And the next slide speaks to it a little bit as well. But the real idea here is that by bringing the quoting process or the CPQ process inside of Salesforce, we're creating a full lead to cash platform or a full lead-to-cash system, which is going to eliminate many of those challenges that teams face today in a disconnected environment. When you have all of your customer information stored in a single data set, all of your customer-facing teams can easily understand what the status is and then rapidly respond to new requests. And then, of course, with CPQ and the automation, we talked about this already, it makes it much easier and much faster for sales teams to go through the correct configuration processes, accurately price and discount that, securing appropriate approvals, and then flow that through into contracts and orders that can be interpreted by sales teams and support teams appropriately so that it's billed correctly and supported so that the customer continues to be happy and ultimately is willing to entertain a conversation around add-ons, upsells, and renewals further down the road.
That's great.
So what I like to think of with the previous slide is really answering the question, why do anything? And it's because it's going to bring your processes into one place. And to me, this slide is really why do it with Salesforce. And the reason is Salesforce Quote to Cash is built on the customer success platform to deliver that full lead to cash solution tied into the world's #1 CRM. And that makes it much easier for your teams to be successful, even though customer expectations are at their highest they've ever been. The reason they can do that is because, like I said, all of your customer data is in the same place. So every team has that 360-degree view of the customer and can knowledgeably respond to requests with a higher chance of success. Importantly, from your business's point of view, your teams get a consistent experience across all of the different Salesforce apps. They function similarly and have the same UI, so it makes it much easier for people to get to the right information very quickly. And critically, you can customize this solution to fit your business's unique needs, whether that's through extensions on the App Exchange, customizations using Lightning App Builder, or clicks and codes to customize and tailor Salesforce to match your business process. But I think most importantly is that by having that common data model and having all of that information in one place, you're then able to use analytics, reports, and dashboards to really derive deep insight across your business so you can become smarter with all of your different customer interactions.
That's great, and you've given the perfect lead-in to Vic at Limelight, talking about his experience, because you were talking about the fact that with a single data set and everything integrated in the same platform, it creates a much better user experience. So, Vic, I'd love you to jump into the conversation here. Let's do a quick introduction of Limelight Networks. You may have already done that early on, but tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then let's jump right into the problems that we were trying to solve.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brad, and thanks, Rob, for that nice tee up. Yeah, so Limelight Networks, for those of you who are not aware of what we do and how we do it, we're a really exciting company. It's really a great time in our company history to be working here as we run a global content delivery network and are serving up content for companies that need to deliver high-performance video on demand, stream live events, do large-scale software downloads, or provide gaming to their respective audiences. We also offer services such as optimizing website performance, as well as offer a suite of security products with WAF and preventing DDoS attacks. And so just in that statement alone, you can tell that we have a lot of different bundles that require a lot of different product configurations and pricing that goes with that. And so we really were looking for a CPQ tool that could be a replacement for our legacy tool that was more native to the Salesforce environment. As a company, we're very proud of the hard work that's gone into our network infrastructure and that it's become highly stable and well-maintained and has given us an edge in the industry to achieve high levels of customer satisfaction around the globe. And obviously our salespeople are constantly in tune with these customers to make sure they're in tune with their needs on an ongoing basis. So for several years as a company internally, we've been really striving to consolidate our internal systems and really maximize their impact across the business in order to achieve efficiency and really facilitate productivity.
Yeah, that's great. As you provide that introduction, you're right. If you can imagine the variety of services you probably offer in that hosted content environment, there is a lot of compatibility and bundles and pricing and anything you might imagine in that particular environment. Let's talk a little bit about your pain points, because you drove towards CPQ with some particular items in mind, right? And if we look at this slide, we've got 4 or 5 items picked out here that you've talked about, and I want you to kind of walk me through the first one, walk me through each of them. And frankly, some of this was driven by the fact that it was not native to Salesforce, right? It was a separate platform, and you're having difficulty with user adoption and difficulty navigating around some of the content. Is that right?
That is correct. And as Rob said, sales lifecycle really touches many areas of the business. And so those pain points were really coming from a lot of different areas where the impact was far-reaching. The largest area, obviously, would be from the sales team. And in early 2016, we actually did an anonymous survey with the team. And some of the feedback that we got that was enlightening was that things like the administrative burden on them and the amount of work they needed to do within the legacy system was high. And the tool itself, we heard things like the user interface and the experience was cumbersome in the sense that a lot of times they needed to remember certain point-and-click processes instead of having them be intuitive. Not memorizing those properly often resulted in them having to restart processes over from the beginning. From that standpoint, it would be a big win to come up with something that was more user-friendly to the sales user base. From a deal desk perspective, and this goes to the next point about the bundle setup, we were using a very expensive vendor to really maintain that legacy CPQ tool. They had domain expertise that are at that time our deal desk was actually managing the tool itself together with this vendor. And what we realized is that when it came time to configure bundles and set up products and pricing, because it was all hard-coded into the system, the responsiveness to the needs of our product team, who are continually coming out with different approaches to be able to offer products and services to our customers, it wasn't really as responsive as we needed it to be for the business, and nor did we have that internal control that we wanted over many elements of it. From a legal,
so you couldn't easily create bundles. It was difficult for you essentially to launch new products. What was the timetable if your PMs brought you a new product idea? What was the timetable and the effort that was required to set it up in the old system?
Sure. Yeah, it could actually spiral into several months just because of the nature of the custom coding. So yeah, it was definitely a long cycle. Not to mention that legacy tool had some challenges with actually applying updates that were released by the company. So we were on a backward version that we couldn't update to the new version of based on those custom configurations. So so that was a barrier as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and you were about to talk about the departmental silos and so forth.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Obviously, from a legal and finance perspective, as Rob was saying, that anything that can make the quote to cash lifecycle faster to realize revenue would be a big win for the company. And with the legacy system, once again, a lot of that document management and contract information was hard coded in. So if there were ever a change to master services agreements or some of the terms of the arrangement, it wasn't as responsive as legal wanted it to be. And from a finance perspective, that legacy system from a licensing and maintenance perspective were a large cost burden on the business and was expensive on both fronts. So that was a driving force as well.
And it's interesting that you're describing some fundamental architectural challenges, right? And it sounds like the native CPQ, the way that Salesforce uses fields and everything else is probably a huge advantage once you get all this solved, right?
Absolutely, and that was one of the biggest things we found just in my team, who is responsible in our company in sales operations for managing Salesforce CRM. We always had that sort of mindset to be able to turn and burn solutions very quickly for the rest of the business. But when it came time for CPQ, we really didn't have control over that. So by bringing it native and having our team kind of bring it internally, we now were able to have a greater hand in delivering success for the business, which since the rollout has been already the company's seen tremendous impact in the turnaround of things we found in the system that could be improvements, as well as we mentioned the setup of bundles and products and pricing.
That's great. And you're about to talk a little bit about document output, right? I know that was a challenge in your old system too. Tell us a little bit about what that scenario was like.
Yep, and document output, the document engine of the legacy system was once again not very, not easily configurable. So it was a custom coded approach that anytime the deal desk or legal wanted to make changes, it was a request to the vendor to have to try to make those changes. A lot of the architecture of the UI was based upon this tabular approach where information was kind of hidden behind certain tabs. So the business couldn't align very well on the approvals process to really know where things were at in the approval life cycle, and from a document management standpoint to be able to change both our English and Japanese versions of the document on the fly. It was a request that had a long turnaround cycle as well.
Well, that's great. And then that last item is a key item for a lot of people. You know, a lot of times reporting and visibility is pretty limited unless they're completely integrated and native on the same platform. And it sounds like, again, with the older system, you're really struggling to get the kind of analytics and reports that you wanted out of the process.
Yep, and the two-part system, obviously, there was some reporting handled on the legacy side as well as some reporting on the Salesforce side that were disconnected, and unfortunately wasn't giving us the full 360 view we wanted from many different perspectives. So by moving to the native version that kind of sits on top of the products object and uses core Salesforce technology, there wasn't that back and forth of data, and the reporting requirements obviously became a lot easier to deliver.
That's great. All right. Well, let's, you know, if we move on to this next slide, I'm going to kind of click short and make sure I have everything out here all at once. But you know, we'll spend just a minute talking about the scope of the project, because that's part of the value was that, you know, sometimes as you implement enterprise software, that can be months to a year or more, depending on the scope of the project, right? So part of the benefit of moving to Salesforce CPQ that I've understood from you is that it was, you know, a relatively short implementation, and you were able to implement a fairly broad scope of items, right? We want to touch on a few of those here. How was your implementation experience?
Sure. The implementation experience was good from a couple of vantage points. First, the vendor that we selected after many interviews, Simplus, was very flexible in working according to our desired goals. We did have a lot of domain expertise around our previous installation of CPQ that obviously we wanted to migrate into the new tool. So being able to work together in an analysis and design phase leading up to the 8-week development cycle in a very short time frame, we were able to compile a nice body of work to be able to align everybody's roles and responsibilities off of to get the project kick-started quickly, and then obviously move it through the development phase. And we probably shoehorned a 12 to 14 week project into an 8-week project that took some early mornings and late nights, but we definitely delivered a good solution to the business as a result.
That's great. And I've talked to the development team. They've appreciated Limelight because you guys were well defined. You knew what you needed, and you worked quickly through the process to be able to help make everything happen. But, you know, I'll probably just touch on one or two things on this slide, then we can get back to sort of the impact on your organization. But it sounds like, you know, you had 4 custom quotes with 156 total sections. Those were legal and content sections that were based upon the variables in the quote template. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. So you think about your quote, and our quote doubles as our contract. So we have a lot of the English version and Japanese version elements that needed to be compiled within each of those templates, and our Japanese version also has an English version attached to it. So building out those templates initially was a pretty big lift, but the nice part about it is once you get those templates in place, the changes and configurations to them, if changes are needed, it's very easy and on the fly, which was a huge time saver over our previous tool that required the custom coding and the long turnaround cycle. So we saved a lot of time and effort by implementing that document generation tool that relied on those quote templates.
That's great. Hey, let's talk a minute about approval process, because you noted before that you really didn't have a finger on the approval process, and here you've got 4 approval chains with up to 25 approvals, and it looks like we developed a couple of Visualforce email templates. Has that approval process been dramatically improved?
Yes, it has, and the feedback that we've gotten from all areas of the business is that because those approval processes are aligned on the quote object and they kind of build as the approval process builds and shows where it's gone through in the approval process, who's approved it, and who it sits with. Everyone can now see that on the quote object in Salesforce. It's very familiar to other approval processes they use in other areas of the business. And because of that, we've greatly enhanced our ability to know where things are at in the approval process and have everyone aligned to make sure that we're getting final approvals and getting the customers the agreements they need to transact and close business. So it's a big improvement in our quote to cash process, as well as the process automation piece, which for SOX compliance allowed us to deliver the right documents to the right profiles within Salesforce to ensure that like the sales reps could not see the executable version of a document during certain approval stages, and that legal could only output a signature blocked version once the final approval was given. So there were some very tight controls that our legal department wanted to make sure were there, and the process automation piece made that happen for us.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that sounds like this is a great improvement. One other thing before we go on to the next slide is we sort of skipped over it. It sounds like you had hundreds of pricing rules and conditions and actions, right? And I can imagine with the depth of product selection you have that you probably had a wide variety of pricing rules depending on combinations and discounts and customer types and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about scope there, because that seems like that was a fairly hefty lift and something that was positive for the organization.
Yeah, the lift there was amazing from the standpoint of the Simplus and Limelight teams working together to really deliver a lot of those rules around all the different products, all the different permutations of discounts and uplifts that needed to be considered from many different perspectives. And then as the pricing configurator in CPQ needed to be sort of customized with a monthly, annual, and one-time dynamic to make sure we were looking at the right data points in the right ways as we did in our previous legacy system. So there was some focus around that, as well as the fact that we deal in 6 currencies around the globe. So the combination of those factors made for a lot of focus around that piece during the course of the development of the project.
That's great. Well, you know, the next slide really just talks about the overall benefits, and we'll touch on each of these for a little bit. We're doing great for time, and I really want to make sure that we touch on what the value was to your organization, right? Because when we talked the other day a little bit about this process, you said that the move from the old system to the new system had an impact basically across everybody, right? Yeah. That it touched the entire organization. And granted, you've had this in place for a little while. You may not have total productivity baselines, but you said the reaction from the organization has been very strong and very positive. So tell us a little bit about the cross-organization impact.
Absolutely. So once again, from the different lenses within the business, our sales team is really excited to be able to work a process that's intuitive to what they normally see in other areas of Salesforce, right? It's very familiar. They're able to not get lost anywhere in the process. It takes them through a very smooth sort of workflow that we've produced some training materials around and some checklists to get them familiar. If they need to refer back to the checklist to understand how to work the process, they have that available to them. So, but all in all, once they've worked it a couple times, it's very intuitive based on a very similar learning approach as other areas of Salesforce, so that was a win. From the standpoint of our deal desk, obviously they're able to see things now and really isolate what stage particular quotes are in using list views, so they can see what's in a pending state versus a recalled state versus an approval state. Something that they really didn't have before, and has really given them some really good insights to turn around quotes much quicker by region. Our legal department has expressed some really good feedback in the sense that our supplemental terms, which is something that they need to customize for particular clients and was not available in the past for the sales team to align on. Now everybody, because that particular data resides on our quote object, everyone has visibility into it. Only legal can make the edits to it, but it's really kind of aligned everybody to, and communication to turn around things internally much more quickly and more effectively, as well as I mentioned that SOX piece to make sure that the right documents are only being accessed for a draft version for our sales team and an executable version for our deal desk and legal teams.
That's great. You know, I was going to say it's interesting because it feels like, you know, that simple productivity to be able to allow your internal stakeholders to be able to move quickly and to be able to make edits and know where the process is. Those are all super valuable in terms of not only simple business productivity, but almost in terms of morale. You know what I mean? You said you got that survey from the sales group early on, and they expressed their frustration about their tool, about the tool. What do you think their input is now, or do you think they're happy with the change? I mean, what's their reaction?
Yeah, so obviously initially with any rollout, there's a little bit of acclimation
Sure.
that goes right with it, but yeah, since we've rolled it out and since we've made some refinements, we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the sales team that just from the standpoints of it being familiar within Salesforce, actually having a single sort of, it's a very clean bundle and pricing grid that when you're selecting bundles and configuring your products, once you get to the pricing grid, you're actually able to see all the bundles and all the related product SKUs on a single view with all the pricing to be able to apply discounts and uplifts. And from that standpoint, they think that that single easy to read screen is one of the greatest impacts that they've had within the tool.
No, that's great. And I think Rob's got something close to that set up in his demo board. One of the last bullets before we head over for a little bit of demo with Robb is let's talk just a moment about visibility, approvals, and reporting. Now, you talked a little bit about the deal desk, being able to have views and see everything and so forth. Now that all of this is in one native single data set on the platform, have you been able to develop other kinds of reports for the executives across the board that are helpful, that are more informative than what you had before?
Absolutely. We've been working with the product team to deliver reports that are SKU-based to isolate some trends on what we're seeing in quotes, and for our global vice presidents of our sales team to hone in on what's driving success and from the standpoint of, from a product dynamic, if you will. So we're getting a lot more visibility already out of the reporting piece. We've also legal in the past when it came to actually reviewing like descriptions on particular product SKUs, they actually had to, in the legacy system, print out a quote that they added all 356 products and services to just to review the data, where when we showed them that you could go to the product object and just isolate the active products and see in a single view all the dynamic information about that product, they were amazed. So that kind of visibility, that's been pretty dramatic.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, we appreciate hearing your story. I think what we're going to do is, you know, it's had such an interesting impact on Limelight. We're going to have Robb take over and do a little demo in his demo org, and we may jump in from time to time on his demo and talk about, you know, similarities with your organization and so forth. But it sounds like CPQ's had just a fantastic impact on Limelight. So fantastic. Yep. Thank you. We appreciate hearing that story.
Absolutely.
All right, so now we're at the CPQ demo moment. We're going to hand over a presentation to our friend Robb. He's going to take it over from there. So Robb, will you tell me when you get the signal from GoToWebinar?
I did. Thanks, Brad. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. It should look a lot like Salesforce.
Yeah, I think we can see it. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So let me just set the stage briefly here. You might recognize the new Salesforce Lightning UI. The inner product marketer in me always wants to show the latest and greatest, so I'm going to do this demo using Lightning. But bear in mind that everything we take a look at today, you can access using the traditional or classic Salesforce Aloha interface, or actually all through Salesforce One on your mobile device as well. So just to set the stage for you, for this demo, I'm going to play the role of a sales rep at a fictional company called Infinity Solutions. That's a purveyor of cloud-based financial and reporting software. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to go as quickly as I can. I want to try and cover, a lot of functionality in a little bit of time. So Brad, please feel free to stop me if there's any one point that you want to dig into a little bit more.
And we're doing good for time. I think you had about a 10-minute demo set up, and that should work out perfectly.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's get started. So you'll see I'm here on the account page inside of Salesforce, and the reason I want to start here is actually to show everybody the relative lack of information in here. In this scenario, we're going to be selling our products and services to Presidio Technology for the first time. So you can see their account record is pretty barren. We have a contact in here, we have an opportunity assigned for us, but there really isn't any other information here on the account record. Just take a note of that. That's all going to change as we walk through the CPQ process, and you'll actually see how, by following through the sales cycle inside of Salesforce, we're able to populate all that information and provide the information that our other teams would need in order to be able to continue to transact with this customer and keep the business moving forward. So let's go ahead and dive into our opportunity. I've had a few conversations with the customer already, so I know what their needs are, and I'm ready to go ahead and configure the solution that I think would be ideal for them. So I'm going to click the New Quote button, and I just need to provide a few pieces of information for us to get started. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that this primary checkbox here is actually ticked off. The reason I want to do that is because with CPQ, I can create as many different quotes as I want to play around with different product or pricing scenarios, but that primary quote is going to be the one that actually syncs all the product information as well as the opportunity amount to our opportunity, so that my manager and our executives can have an accurate forecast of what products and at what prices they're being offered to. Lastly, I just need to select a contact over at my customer's account and enter a subscription term since we're selling cloud software today. So I'm going to go ahead and make it 12 months or 1 year. I have my start date set there for the day after we close this deal, so I'm ready to go ahead and click Save and actually dive into configuring the solution and adding products into my quote. So I'll click Edit Lines here to get started, and this is actually going to bring us into the Salesforce CPQ application. And the first thing we're going to see is what we call our guided selling module. Guided selling is really neat because it's an opportunity to ask questions about your customer's business needs in very plain English. So reps can actually walk through this with the customer. If they know what their customer's expectations are, they can go ahead and fill this out themselves. But you notice that as I start to change answers inside of this guided selling module, the questions that are being asked of me start to change as well to really help me zero in on exactly the right solution for my customer. In this case, I know that Presidio Technology is looking to manage time and expenses. I know they want a cloud deployment, and they're an enterprise company, so I have all the right answers in there. I'm going to click Suggest, and you'll see that CPQ comes back with the ideal bundle for me to offer to my customer over at Presidio. So we're going to go ahead and select that, and we're ready to move into our advanced product configuration, which is really my opportunity as a sales rep to make sure that this solution is perfectly tailored to the needs of my customer. One of the things that makes product configuration challenging is that it's governed by rules. Products have different rules in terms of what's compatible with each other. Some products require another product in order to be sold together, and some products exclude other products from being sold on the order. And in a traditional paradigm, it's really on the rep to remember all of that as they're putting together the solution, which invites a lot of opportunity for error. The advantage of CPQ is that the system is going to manage all of those rules for me and validate my configuration as I'm making it. So I'm not actually able to put together a solution here that isn't going to work, which is really comforting both for reps and for product managers as they try and implement these solutions with their customers. So let's go ahead and try that out. I know that finance and reporting is a huge issue for my customers, so I'm going to go ahead and select that license. And you'll see as soon as I did that, we actually got an option down here in add-ons for report exporting tools. And this is a great showcase of one of those product rules where the system knows I can't sell the export tools without the license. So until I have that license selected, it's not even an option that's available for me. We can also see we're only able to sell the expense reimbursement in blocks of 1,000 expense reports, or we can offer an unlimited subscription. But again, CPQ knows you can only have one type of reimbursement block. And so it's going to tell me right there very helpfully, if I want to give them unlimited, I have to deselect that blocked option. So I'm going to go ahead and make that change. We discussed it in training, didn't seem to be that important to my customers. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off for now to try and keep the price under control. I'm going to go ahead and give them a quick start enablement package, and I'm ready to save this and move forward into pricing this deal out so I can get it over to my contact. But you'll see, CPQ again is going to go and validate all of my selections and come back with this recommendation where we found as a company, our customers tend to be much more successful if they have training included with net new implementations. And so since CPQ knows that's the best practice and can see that I didn't select it in my configuration, it can actually give me an alert and suggest that I go back and make a modification before I move forward. And of course, you can customize those alerts to, yeah.
Hey, it's kind of interesting. I wanted to sort of highlight this process because you started out from a guided selling standpoint, asking a few fundamental questions, and then a large product list gets filtered to only the options that apply to your responses. And then you're able to essentially build these rules that are really dynamic, that essentially control compatibility and quantity and all those kinds of things. And then I love that last feature because essentially, even though you have all these validation rules built into the product set, you can trigger a last confirmation before you exit the quoting process. I think that's really interesting because it really helps your salespeople to be able to respond accurately and even upsell if you want to put that in for a confirmation before you leave the quote.
I totally agree. I think, it's really easy to talk about CPQ in the context of accuracy and, rules enforcement. But one thing that sometimes gets lost is that it's also a great opportunity to guide your sales reps' behavior. So by making certain products selected by default or putting in reminders like we just saw with that training notification, we can help reps to actually, invite upsell and cross-sell opportunities. And not only that, but make sure that they have all of the components that we know are required or suggested in order for our customers to be very successful and happy with that solution.
Perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and act on that suggestion that CPQ gave me and add some training back into my product configuration. And now I feel pretty confident in moving forward and pricing this out so we can get a proposal put together. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. In the background, Salesforce CPQ is taking all of the products that we put in our configuration, running them against the price book that we have selected, and it's ultimately going to take me here to this screen where I have an ability to start to apply discounts and make sure that not only do I have a solution that's going to work to meet their needs, but that I'm selling it at a price that they're going to be able to afford that meets their budget so we can actually get this deal moving forward. And very much like the product configuration, there's some flexibility as well as some rules enforcement that comes with how we approach pricing. So one of the things you can see right away is as I mouse over the discount fields on the different line items here in my quote, you'll see that I'm able to apply discounts in certain cases. So let's go ahead and say 20% for the user licenses. Let's try 30% on that admin license. But I'm unable to add discounts to certain other services, and that's because we made it a company policy here at Infinity Solutions not to discount our training or our implementation services. And so CPQ is going to know that and enforce that for me automatically. So I'm going to go ahead and hit calculate to see what the impact of those discounts I put in is going to be on my quote. And you can see right away, CPQ is going to update the total for me here. And I actually got it a little under my customer's budget. But it's also going to tell me what sort of approval is required in order for me to move forward to that level of discount. And in this case, getting a discount from my manager isn't outside the realm of possibility, but I really don't want to have a discussion with the VP on a 30% discount. So I think I want to try and take a slightly different approach to getting this proposal within budget. So I'm going to go ahead and reset those discounts really quickly. And instead, I want to try and take a different approach. I know from my conversations that my customer's budget is $225,000. So I'm going to put that into my customer target amount here, hit calculate, and actually let CPQ figure out what the appropriate level of discount is going to be. And this gives me a number of advantages. First of all, I didn't have to waste a lot of time going and playing with different manual discounts in order to come up with the right number. I'm also now spreading this discount over every single discountable product, so we're hitting multiple cost centers and making this deal look better for our organization. But I'm also now able to meet my customers' expectation and also not have to worry about securing approval from management or from executives. So I feel really comfortable with this. We're now at the right price. We have the right solution together for the customer. I'm ready to go ahead and save this configuration and this pricing and generate those proposal documents so we can get it out to our customer at Presidio Technology. So first thing I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and submit this for approval. Because I didn't have any approval required, CPQ is going to automatically approve this for me. So you can see I now have an approved quote, and I'm ready to go ahead and generate those documents. And of course, if I'd stuck with that higher level of discount, then it would trigger that approval chain. My manager would get a notification, or my executive would get a notification saying that there was a quote needed for review and to take a look and approve or reject. Fortunately, we're able to skip that, and we're ready to just go ahead and generate our documents. One of the things you heard Vic talking about with challenges in the previous system was getting documents that were localized for the right region. CPQ makes that really easy by allowing me to select the output language that I want and also select the proposal template that I want. So I could send a full proposal, which is what I want to do in this case, but I have the opportunity to send some other items or generate some other documents to the customer as well, like a simple quote, a statement of work, or maybe just a contract for their legal team to review. And then finally, you can see I have an opportunity to add some additional documents. And so this is a great opportunity for the marketing team to get involved and start to suggest some additional content that can really help move that proposal forward and give your customers some justification as they go to negotiate the final terms. So I have that all configured the way I want. I'm just going to quickly hit preview to make sure that everything looks good. And what's happening now is Salesforce is actually going and dynamically generating this proposal for me. So it's putting all of the configuration information and pricing information I needed into my quote template. And it's also going and pulling the appropriate contract terms and conditions based on the products and services I configured. So we have the right legal contract or the right terms and conditions going along with this deal. And you can see the output document here. So we have our quote, we have all the different line items that we configured. As I scroll down a little bit more, we have the T's and C's specifically tailored to the products and services we quoted today for Presidio. We have our signature block down here at the bottom. And then, of course, you can see that attached data sheet that our marketing team put together. So I really do have, a very comprehensive package. I have the appropriate contract, and I have the appropriate quote together. I'm ready to go ahead and send that off to the customer using DocuSign. So let's just fast forward in time. I'm going to jump back to our opportunity. Let's say, they were really ecstatic to have all the functionality that they required at the price that they'd asked for. So they're ready to sign on the dotted line, and as a sales rep, I'm ready to go ahead and move this opportunity to the close one stage. And as soon as I hit save, it's going to kick off a workflow inside of Salesforce to take care of that last piece of the sales process, which is taking that quote that the customer has accepted and turning it into products, turning it into services, and turning it into an order that we can ultimately fulfill for the customer. So with that, I'm just going to quickly return to our account record. And you remember at the beginning of this demo, there really wasn't a ton of information on here. That's changed pretty significantly now that we've gone through the CPQ effort. You can see that original opportunity, but you can now see the quote that we had created attached right here on the account record for easy reference. We also now have a sales contract that's been assigned to our account, recognizing that closed one deal and all of the terms and conditions therein. We also now have subscriptions, so this relates to all of the software licenses that we sold on our 12-month subscription interval. And then we have a couple of assets here, and those are those one-time purchase items like the training and the quick start implementation that we sold them. So I have all of that information really easily accessible here on the account record so that later on, after the sales rep, I'm done with this deal, a support member or a finance member can come to this account page, see exactly what I sold them, see the contract that it's associated to, and know exactly what has to be delivered or what questions the customer might be asking. So I think that wraps up the quick and simple demo of CPQ, and certainly if you want to learn more, contact us, and we're happy to show you any additional functionality. So Brad, let's hand it back over to you.
Rob, thank you. That's perfect. I'm taking over the screen, and we should be back to the CPQ demo slide. Now we've got a couple minutes left here, and I wanted to actually jump back over to Vic. You know, Vic, it's interesting as we look at this demo. Frankly, he produced a complex quote in a matter of minutes, right? And it sounds like after we got through implementation of CPQ over at Limelight, that you went from a behemoth process that seemed a little bit cumbersome in terms of generating quotes to quoting, to generating quotes in minutes, so to speak. Is that kind of your experience?
Absolutely. We have a pretty wide-ranging set of criteria and parameters that we need to capture around regional premiums, for instance, a lot of different aspects around different discounting approaches and uplift approaches. So all of that had to be worked in to the overall modeling, and the tool was really flexible enough to accommodate a lot of those complex needs.
Yeah, and like you've described, even the updating over time, once you have the templates and the content, and you even have a variety of rules, you can essentially duplicate a rule and make an adaptation in order to be able to adapt it for something you're launching, right? It's just not that difficult to create a new process that, again, fits into this streamlined workflow for the sales team.
Correct. As long as you have administrators that understand, and that was the nice part about working with Simplus, is not only did they help us with the implementation of CPQ, but they also educated us on how to administer and maintain it, and that was invaluable for our company to be able to sustain this over the long term.
Oh, that's great. One of the things that there's a little product demo slide there. We have this slide from Salesforce that talked about the impact of CPQ on an organization, and when they did their broad survey, they found that quote to order conversion was increased dramatically, approval time got increased dramatically, faster quote generation, and reporting errors. And it sounds like that's reflected inside your organization too, right? It sounds like everything got moved up in quantum speed in terms of how you're able to handle your business.
Absolutely. The amount of time savings, the overall financial savings that we gained in moving to the CPQ tool, being native to Salesforce, and just that benefit of getting the economies of scale for all the different departments. It's been a big win.
No, that's perfect. Well, we've had a couple of questions from the crowd. Why don't we keep both of you online? Go ahead. Why don't we keep both of you online, and we'll chat a little bit about these answers in general, because Vic, I think you just answered one of these. Somebody asked, is there an additional support package that that we can buy to sort of help with the implementation over time? And you mentioned two things. Number one, Simplus is able to train you so that you can do whatever you'd like to do. And number two, you just signed off on a support package so that we can help you over time, right?
Absolutely. In both capacities, once again, that flexibility and willingness to go above and beyond was really helpful for us in a very wide-eyed CRM team looking to expand our skill set and being able to administer CPQ and Salesforce CPQ, as well as having someone there to support us on an ongoing basis to be able to run certain scenarios by and to really continue that sort of ongoing maintenance arrangement. We've really appreciated that willingness to be a true partner.
No, that's great. One of the other things is I know that you have several different templates and so forth, and someone was asking just that good question about can the templates or the output documents be branded? And I'll let probably both Vic and Rob chat to that a little bit. Vic, it probably sounds like everything's completely branded in Limelight and looks professional. Is that right? Yeah,
there's some elements of it that required a little bit of configuration in the HTML and CSS, but that's just from the standpoint of delivering the right fields and the right setup and being able to pull the right logos into the right spots. So that piece of it, yeah, once it's set up, it's extremely customizable to be visual and in alignment with the branding requirements of a business, and very flexible to accommodate all the data points.
Thanks, Vic, and I can add on to that a little bit as well. you can create as many different templates as you want to inside of Salesforce CPQ. And as Vic alluded to, it's essentially an HTML and CSS template that then becomes populated with whatever output data you need to drop into it. So you have full flexibility in determining, what it looks like, what the colors are. And there's also some flexibility in determining what shows up on that quote as well. In the demo, we looked at a pretty simple one, but if we wanted to, we could choose to include product images, we could include the discounts, we could include subtotals. So the world is really your oyster when it comes time to really figure out what the look and feel you want those templates to be. And the last note I'll put on there is, while you can create as many different templates as you want, you also have the option to restrict the use of those to roles. So like Vic was talking about, for compliance purposes, if you need to have certain templates for particular roles or for particular regions, you have the flexibility to do that as well.
No, that's perfect. We've got a couple other questions here, and then we're going to wrap up. Granted, I said 45 minutes. I know we blocked out an hour, so I think the content has been valuable and the flow's been good. So I think we've done well to address it. One of the things that I'll address sort of online is people ask, what's the scope of a CPQ project? How long does it take? And in general, that really has to do with the complexity of the internal processes. I would say Vic is probably a good example of someone where with Limelight, there's a fair amount of complexity, and it got achieved within 8 weeks if we manage the project well. But the projects can go anywhere from 2 months to 6 months, depending on the depth and complexity of everything that might have to happen, right? So it's really sort of customer dependent. But at Simplus, we can work closely with clients to make sure that we even manage well, and Vic, you might be able to say something about this, manage well the distribution of responsibility between internal teams and Simplus. We're not trying to manage the entire project, and we work closely with the teams in terms of their internal skill sets. Was that your experience, Vic?
Yeah, I'm sure that your team could handle the entire project if that was a requirement of your customers. But yeah, from our standpoint, that collaboration between the two teams they worked exactly as we set out to work together. Did a great job in making sure each team had its marching orders, and it actually, from my standpoint, made me look good because at our sales kickoff in 2017, I was presented the Global Innovation Award for the CPQ project by our Chief Sales Officer. So Simplus made me look really good in the project.
There you go. That's what we like to do. Hey, so we're going to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for their time. We've had a couple other questions come in here at the last minute. What we're going to do is essentially produce a Q&A, and certainly if you want to reach out to any of us at Simplus, we can answer questions specifically about CPQ and be helpful. The webinar has been recorded. We will be posting that online, and we'll also post the slide deck. There's some additional product content past the thank you slide that we'll show once we produce it out, and then we'll also do a Q&A on some of these great questions. So, but I also want to return and say thank you so much to Vic and Rob. Vic, thank you for sharing your story at Limelight. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for all the good work.
No worries. And Rob, thank you. Fantastic demo, a good walkthrough of CPQ, and a good analysis of the market trends in general.
My pleasure, Brad, and huge thank you to you and the Simplus team for putting this together, and of course, everybody in the audience for joining us today.
Yep. Thank you, everybody in the audience. We had a good crowd. Paul, anything else before we sign off?
I don't think so. We'll be sending out some follow-up emails, and again, you'll be able to get a copy of all of this. If your question wasn't answered, again, we apologize. We ran out of time, but we will be putting a Q&A together for the remaining questions.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and thanks for joining.